I mean, this is the argument, right? This is what I saw back in 2009. The reason marketing budgets get cut, the marketers cannot understand whether it's working or not. There's no evidence that it's working. And so it's easier just to cut it. But if I have a buyer and I can say, no, 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 move all those dollars to me, cut everybody else. If you give your money to me, I will guarantee you leads, live, warm, ready to buy leads, and I'll prove it to you with all the information. I'll send them into your CRM system via an API. It totally changes the environment that you're competing in.
Welcome to the Revenue Room, where we dive deep into the strategies, technologies, and stories behind successful revenue growth in B2B media, events, and data information businesses. I'm your host, Heather Holtz-Knudsen, the CEO of H2K Labs and Revenue Room Connect. Today, we're joined by a fascinating entrepreneur who's operating at the intersection of AI, defense technology, and healthcare media. Our guest has built not one, but multiple successful companies, holds top secret clearance developing AI for the U.S. military, and somehow finds time to compete as a world-class Ironman athlete. He's the chairman and CEO of Torch.ai, a defense-focused AI software company, and the chairman of MEDQOR, a healthcare media company with a revolutionary data platform called Chronicle. Please welcome Brian Weaver. Brian, welcome to Revenue Room.
Thank you, Heather. Glad to be here.
So I'm really excited to have this conversation. One, just because there's so many different and interesting facets of your background, your career, your experiences. But also you and I have been talking over the last couple of weeks about Chronicle and how that platform, which does like incredible things for customers who are advertising in media, but I was just so fascinated by how it all came together and how you're running that business alongside Torch. But you have this illustrious background. So can you tell listeners a little bit about like your path and how you arrived here?
You know, it's my joke is if there was a brochure about this journey, I probably wouldn't have taken the first step. And I think Oprah said it best, like in a commencement speech or something, where looking backwards, all of those little steps on the path connect. And when you look forward, you don't really see the path. I mean, am the son of an Army intelligence officer. My mother's a mathematician, got Mensa chemists and rocket scientists in my gene pool. Always a super curious person. And I had, when I was even a kid in grade school and high school, I had my own companies, lawn mowing companies, things like that. So I think it's kind of a weird environment, maybe not weird, but an extraordinary environment that I started developing some of these aptitudes and attitudes about life and work and all that kind of stuff. And I guess at the end, I'm just a curious person. I feel very, very fortunate to have resources available to me to explore some of those curiosities. It's been a big life and certainly a big journey. But again, when you piece it together, looking backwards, it does make sense. But every day is different. So anyway, it's a fun thing. Glad to be here and share some of that story with you.
Yeah, so it sounds like from your upbringing that data and analytics and utilizing that to drive curiosity actually and understand things has just been part of your DNA from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, I was a philosophy nerd in college, and my first company, believe it or not, that sort of sets a framework to start approaching things and understanding how to think or maybe how to frame things. My very first company that I started was doing behavioral analytics on sports fans. And I happened to be in motorsports as a market. NASCAR in particular was a NASCAR licensee, all kinds of interesting things. This is in my early 20s when I built my first company. But I was always curious around how to leverage information. And this is going back now almost 30 years. So back then, there wasn't data as a business, artificial intelligence, analytics, all this kind of stuff was really nascent. And so I was always interested in how to use that to enable, downstream activities or solutions or things like that. And I just kind of grew up in that. And I built a career in Kansas City, which is also kind of an interesting environment because there's sort of this cocktail of capabilities here. The largest digital agency in the world, Valentine McCormick Global, now VML, owned by WPP, is headquartered here. You got IoT devices with Garmin, you got mobility, Sprint, now T-Mobile. You got all this stuff around here in this environment, and it really did set a condition to being curious around data and how to use technology to make the most of it.
I actually happen to love Kansas City, and I think it's I don't want to say it's the unsung hero of entrepreneurship, but there is so much entrepreneurship going on there that just people don't realize. And I know that because I had a startup that was focused on student entrepreneurs, and one of the investors was from there, so I was there all the time, and I was just always fascinated by the energy, the entrepreneurial energy there.
Yeah, I think
Super
that's
cool.
true. I think the other thing that's interesting about, sort of founding a company, and I've bought and sold and founded several companies, but doing it in a market like Kansas City is hard because there's not tons of investment capital, and it's a very difficult place. The show me state. That phrase exists for a reason. People don't like a lot of flash. They want to see substance and performance, and that really does create a bit of a crucible when you have a startup and early stage venture. You need customers to pay for your solution because investors are not going to provide you runway. So it's a bootstrap sort of mentality here in the Midwest.
Yeah,
Anyway,
for sure.
yeah.
Interesting. Well, let's start with MEDQOR. That's really my sandbox. I mean, I definitely want to talk about what you do with the military and Torch, but we, H2K Labs and Revenue Connect, we're rooted in, media events and anything what I call like data information centered, multi-sided marketplaces. And we focus on how data is used to fuel value creation and revenue and profitability. And I think your story is really front and center as a use case for our listeners in terms of what you did when you bought MEDQOR, the vision you had for it, how you invested in Chronicle. So let's start with what piqued your interest of acquiring MEDQOR in the first place.
Well, the story is fascinating. I acquired MEDQOR from a very large private equity-backed conglomerate called Ascend. I bought the company back in 2009, and it was totally an accident. I was actually recruiting a new CFO for my company, my main company, and the gentleman, this guy Mark, that I had interviewed, he was like, "I'd love to come work for you, but you got to wait 6 or 9 months. I'm in the middle of a sale of my company." And they've got gold handcuffs on me. And so, are you okay with waiting? And so, of course, that piqued my interest. And I said, "Well, tell me about what you're selling." And I ended up acquiring really the keystone asset in this PE-backed roll-up, and that was MEDQOR. And if I go back and I think about really the genesis of that, when I started my first company, I had used actuaries. Early 2000s. There weren't a bunch of AI and ML models. Analytics were kind of an interesting thing, stubby pencil kind of thing. But I was using actuaries to build predictive analyses of consumers. And so that, I had kind of spent a decade living there. And so in 2009, neural networks weren't quite, on the landscape yet. Artificial intelligence has been around obviously for a long time, decades, but the actual practical application of some of these technologies really wasn't there. Neural nets started picking up in, for example, 2010, 2011. So in 2009, when all that stuff is going on in the background, and I get introduced to this company, MEDQOR, and I found, just like most of the other media companies that I've ever been a part of or aware of, they're sitting on a mountain of information, but they have never figured out how to use it to create operational efficiencies or customer impact in a more direct way, certainly indirectly, and maybe more importantly, financial performance. So they were sitting on this treasure chest, and they were, the day-to-day activity, they didn't almost see the full value of the business. So I thought this was a really great opportunity to acquire a company that was sitting on just tons and tons of data that, because of my history and proclivities around information and analytics, I might be able to turn it into something different. So anyway, that's what intrigued me from the beginning. Great company. The healthcare marketplace, as you very well know, is very exciting. It's gone through a lot of change over the last many years. But it's a very healthy, growing marketplace. And so that was just a really great recipe for me and got me really excited at the time.
Had you ever owned a media company before?
I did actually. When I first started, my first job was for Disney. I worked for ABC Cap Cities in a media division that they had, and I happened to be the best account executive there and won a bunch of awards and all that. I didn't stay there very long. And then the next company I worked for was doing kind of programmatic marketing. It had marketing technologies, and they were primarily focused around the visitor and travel industry. But they were more of a tech enabled business. And actually, you don't have enough time for this story, but I got reprimanded at that job for doing some kind of marketing, tech-enabled marketing stuff for NASCAR. And when I was reprimanded, I got really frustrated, and I ended up quitting and starting my first company. And 3 years later, I bought the tech-enabled travel company. That's a whole other story. I didn't get fired, but I did get written up. And it was a really interesting thing. I made millions of dollars for the company, but I took my eye off the core kind of endemic business, and I did this side thing for NASCAR, and it just was not well received by the folks in New York. And so anyway, that's a whole other part of my journey of being an entrepreneur. That was how I first started my first company, and that again set me on a very specific path. But 3 years later, I was able to acquire this company. It was the same kind of idea, although this business was much more of a traditional media company. They didn't have quite the digital footprint that generated all the signals data that MEDQOR has today. But it did put me on a path to understand and appreciate it. And so, I would say early, the first 10 years of my career, it was definitely kind of in that marketing tech space, although very heavily into the analytics side of that industry.
Just for our listeners, what are the brands that MEDQOR owns?
Oh, we've got over 20 different media brands. And I think the key thing is focused around really these modalities and specialties. So we end up having brands, and they're sort of stitched together in a very artful way to cover a really large swath of the healthcare marketplace. And primarily the customers that we're focused on are buyers of medical technologies and to slightly lesser extent pharmaceuticals. And so we're focused around really big companies, Philips, GE, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, big companies like that have products that they're trying to sell through the market. And so that's the big thing. But it spans everything from medical technologies and what they call med tech, so even hospital beds, wheelchairs, all the way to CT scanners, things like that. Anything that you can imagine. GLP-1 drugs, the full gamut of technologies and pharmaceuticals. But I think what's interesting about the business is it's really focused not on just market informatics, but it's about focused around customer journeys and the procurement side of that marketplace. So anyway, again, we've artfully developed, I think, a portfolio of brands that allow us to create some information that we use to optimize market conditions.
So you buy this company, MEDQOR, that at the time was heavily rooted in print.
Yes.
Then you were able to take that. So you actually have this transformation journey that is because one doesn't happen without the other. Is you then had to move that print journey to digital, right? And while you're doing that, you're saying, as we're moving all of these brands, that actually has a wide, vast market opportunity. So there's a huge pool of buyers out there now able to consume information digitally across all of these brands. You're like, well, how do I capture the insights of like buyer identification and matching them with their purchase intent to help solve this seller problem, which is I need to find where those buyers are, how far along the journey they are in, where they're located. It's so you're So you kind of like fast forwarded what a lot of media companies are trying to do today. You just took two huge things and did it at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's sort of the nice thing about acquiring a company like that is I didn't have any fear over trying to protect the legacy business, and I what I saw was the real fundamental flaw. Right, it was a classic media business, and the paradigm there is I'm betting, I'm gambling. A marketer is gambling dollars in an ad spend. They don't know. It's the old cliche. They don't know, which half of their marketing investment works, and really that paradigm exists. Google came in with pay per click, pay for performance, and they changed the nature of the advertising business fundamentally. But still, the problem persists today for marketers. They don't know who's buying, what they're buying, where they're buying it. They don't have that information. They're really focused, around eyeballs, say, right, impressions and things like that. And again, there's a lack of efficacy there. So as a data guy, I want proof. I want facts. I want to know if I'm putting myself in the marketer's shoes and then listening very, very deeply to these challenges that these marketers have, which, by the way, the backdrop of that is budgets are getting reduced. Post Affordable Care Act, there's a massive consolidation in the marketplace, and challenges in pharmaceutical market. All that stuff is all happening at once contextually. And yet the marketplace, especially the media marketplace, sort of persists this flawed paradigm of asking a marketer to trust them and hoping that works over time. And so for me, it's like, well, this is pretty obvious. What if I can take all this data and turn it into evidence that it's working? And then instead of just doing this shotgun approach for a marketer, which by the way, everybody's participating. It's a participatory market. That's what media is. And I thought there was a really key strategic opportunity that was unmet where, can't I do something different and provide a different type of solution to the marketer's challenge, which at the end of the day is marketing qualified leads and high conversion of a sale, sales qualified lead. But that whole funnel, if you will, was suboptimal. And so for me, I was super focused as a data nerd and a little bit of a math guy. How could I optimize some of these things to change that paradigm? So that's the direction we went in. I started investing in the very first version of, we didn't call it Chronicle at the time, called View, but the very first version of the software in 2012. So I bought the company in 2009. 3 years later, I've been investing in technology. But that's at the really, really early out, beginning years of adoption of these neural nets, basically machines guessing and improving analytics. And it was just a great moment to try and build really what I thought was at the time had the potential for a paradigm shift in that particular market. And it's worked.
Absolutely. And again, just for the sake of our listeners, during our conversations, you have mentioned a few times is wanting to compete unfairly, and Chronicle is your answer to unfair competition within this healthcare media space. Can you, in a way that our listeners will understand, can you explain what Chronicle does and the problems Chronicle solves? And from my understanding of Chronicle, it actually solves a myriad of problems, not just one. And so I'll throw it over to you to talk more about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, if you own a business and you're entrepreneurial and you've got resource constraints, which sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. For me, I was always trying to change the value of the business, improve it strategically. So for me, just participating in a marketplace was not very intellectually stimulating. I don't want to just submit some kind of RFP to an ad agency. I want to fundamentally come in and change the environment that we're competing in. So we knew that we were competing against really fundamentally legacy media businesses. We knew how they were going to pitch and CPMs and all this other stuff. You guys, especially your podcast audience, will absolutely know all of these metrics. But everybody does it the same way fundamentally. And so to me, I was like, well, that's part of the problem. So when I say I want to have an unfair competitive advantage, I think the first thing is, who am I competing with? And so I wanted to first understand that. Then I wanted to understand what are the features of the business that I had today and that I could enable with data that would create these conditions where it was really unfair that any competitor over market share, say, would just not have an argument against whatever this structure might be for me. And what I realized was that the biggest thing was proof, evidence that the buyer was there, ready to buy, and that I could take the marketer on the buying journey with this healthcare provider, practitioner, procurement person, that I could allow the marketer to join that buying journey. But I needed proof of that. And so what I saw was a big gap. No one else had this, but I needed to build a software system that was able to collect all of that information, model it, associate it with an HCP. First build out a huge database of high fidelity HCP data, which is not a trivial thing, but associate it with all of that, and then build a framework that would allow the media platform, which is really, that's what the marketers are buying, right? They're buying campaigns and these kind of what they're used to, meeting the customer where they are, but enabling that with these things to move it from making a bet, even an educated bet, to more of a performance-oriented, process-oriented capability. And so then we came up with Chronicle. Again, if anybody's ever built software, it's eye-wateringly expensive. We built 3 different versions of it. Chronicle's been around for about 5 years now. It's mature. But what predated that was a bunch of attempts, a bunch of rewrites, that kind of thing. We're lucky that we've got an amazing team at MEDQOR that really passionately understands the customer's problem, and we built technology to address that. But what MEDQOR specifically does is it's really a combination of 2 things. It's a high-fidelity database of all of the buyers of medical technology or pharmaceutical, combined with content consumption pattern data. I call it telemetry, but basically signals information that we can associate with various stages of a buying cycle, so that we have a really good picture of not just a shotgun approach, but who's actually in the market today, so that we can marry that with the customers, the marketers program at the right time with all of the right messaging. So really optimizing that. It's a little like account-based marketing, but without all the pitfalls of account-based marketing, but done at scale. And so the result is, better engagement from the marketers. They're more active on our platform. The ROI is significantly improved. We actually have proof points where we can argue and support with evidence that their investment with the MEDQOR platform is the best investment they've got relative to all their other options in the market.
So Chronicle allows you to, basically it's collecting first party data from your known users, right? And across all of the MEDQOR assets, all of your owned properties, and gives a single view of the customer to you as a company, one, about what that customer's value is and what it's consuming, et cetera. But also to an advertiser who is advertising with you, you get a view of how those buyers are engaging with your particular campaign assets. But I think what I heard is it also gives them a view of like, by the way, these people may not have engaged with your campaign assets, but they're engaging with other things that indicate high purchase intent. So this is another group that we want to figure out how to help you go after. Yes, because we know they're in market.
Yeah, I mean, it's, the first thing is, how do I observe the market? So market observability is a key thing, but I need a high fidelity picture of that, which means that, really at the core of the Chronicle platform, and the reason, in fact, it's even the name, it's named after this idea of sort of tracking over time all these behaviors, but across the entirety of the platform, both, in the media assets themselves and even off platform. Social media, things like that MEDQOR, has a very broad, platform base. And then we are collecting signals information from across every one of those assets. And that gives us a better view of the marketplace. To exactly your point, Heather, it certainly proves that, hey, this particular campaign, it adds a lot of value because there's more data around that. But it also gives us some relative proof points also. Share of voice is like a classic comparison there, but imagine doing that with people that are in the market and what ads are resonating, even competitive ads are resonating with buyers. All of that information gets really fascinating and interesting, and it ultimately helps the buyer make a good investment decision on the technology of the pharmaceutical. But certainly it has massive implications inside the business and for our customers.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, it's not only that you're collecting data on your owned assets, MEDQOR assets, you actually can collect data when they go off property, off MEDQOR into social media channels, programmatic
Yes.
advertising.
Yes, absolutely. All we have is a tracking pixel. We can drop that on any asset, whether it's a customer asset, whether it's a broad reach social media channel, or certainly any of the owned assets that we have. And we take full advantage of that. It's a key aspect.
And this has been in market for 5 years.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's been an interesting journey when you build a solution like this. It's very difficult. There's a lot of feedback loops with customers, and customers giving you a lot of criticism, and you evolve your thinking alongside the customer. And the nice thing about MEDQOR is we've got a huge hundreds of customers that give us really good high quality feedback, and so that's helped evolve the platform as well. But yeah, it's been quite the journey. It's been fun.
No, and obviously a huge amount of investment, and honestly, you're way ahead of the game from a lot of many other mid-sized, even to large-sized media companies. Like, so, hats off. And I think, the value to the business, like and because you've actually built it yourself, it's your own proprietary IP. The value of your business is actually different, right? You have software and it's scalable, I imagine. Like if you had decided you wanted to be like, hey, MEDQOR wants to go into manufacturing as a media thing, you could scale. Chronicle could be used for any industry, correct?
Yeah, in fact, we built it as a separate platform for exactly that reason. I mean, we have aspirations to grow and expand, certainly in healthcare. But the reality is the platform is designed and it's agnostic to theme or market. And so a tracking pixel is a tracking pixel. And the only thing that we do that might be unique to a market is that we build this pretty robust database of observable buyers in a particular market so that we have kind of a bit of a head start. And in fact, MEDQOR in the last 2 years has launched sort of provocatively more than 15 different vertical platforms so that we can start collecting, what I call sensor data. And it's exactly for that reason, because it's really inexpensive and efficient to just scale out horizontally across modalities and specialties in healthcare, because we've got this platform. It's equally straightforward to do the same thing in nearly any industry, bass fishing, automotive, whatever. And so anyway, we try to endeavor to build a pretty agile, flexible, extensible platform.
So if I were to recap the problems that Chronicle solves for, and I'll use an advertiser from an advertiser perspective, right, is one, Chronicle, because you have collected all of this, and not just first party data, but it sounds like you've built this buyer database in general, that you actually can see market signals that help them make decisions about, who they're targeting, where, messaging, and campaigns, right? So it helps them actually with planning and strategy. It then, when they do launch campaigns, it gives them real-time insights into their campaign performance specific to their own assets. So they don't have to wait a month for a report. Your team, by the way, is in spending weeks putting together reports. It's very efficient, automated, immediate, right? I was on a podcast actually an hour before ours, and the whole Amazon effect that we talked about with audience, like personalized advertisers actually now want that too.
Yeah.
I want it when I want it, how I want it. So that serves that. And then it also gives them insights into what they may be missing in terms of hitting with the campaign, because it gives a view of other buyers that are out there that have high lead scores. And does it deliver actual leads to, like, can they download their leads from there as well, correct? Or can it filter into their CRM?
Yeah, it's an interesting way. So what we learned in building the platform is that the real trick was to think of a buyer not as an identity, say, but it's really a process, because there's a series of events that the say HCP or practitioner we're just going to go through that really creates the value. It's not just that they're a record; it's that they're exhibiting these behaviors, and each behavior leads to the next most valuable behavior on their journey to make an acquisition. Therefore, what gets really fascinating about it is, going back exactly to your question, there's really kind of 3 or 4 layers to it, but we think of it as almost a sales pipeline. You got top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. And what the Chronicle platform, what we've learned, and what has really created a lot of value for customers, is that not only do we provide the exact leads that are ready to buy, that have already been warmed up by, say, the positioning and branding, marketing call to action from the advertiser, but we also are tracking other buyers and potential buyers that are in various stages of their journey that might be adjacent to or have seen some of the messaging but aren't ready to engage. And so you're sort of building the top of the funnel at the same time. Often you're taking this shotgun approach in the legacy way, and you're just focused on bottom of the funnel, who's going to click or who's going to make a phone call. And there's not that nurturing phase at scale. Is really hard to do in that classic legacy media business. And we've solved for that. And I think that nurturing capability, where we're actually delivering the leads directly to the marketer or the advertiser, is one of the big values. And absolutely, every single one of our customers, we can either deliver it to them every Friday by email, or they can download actual live leads and hand them over to their sales department every day. They're updated in real time.
All right. So just on that last description you just provided, if I were to recap it in my language, I this is what I heard: that it's not just that I'm getting insights about this person. I'm seeing where they are in their journey, right? And it's not a linear journey. And so if I had marketed to what looks like a high intent or a high quality buyer, and let's say it was the branding side, they saw an ad of mine, something like that, I actually could then say, okay, I need to warm this prospect up. I have a white paper that I want to deliver. I have a webinar. So we could market to get them into that next stage of the buying process of, okay, now I got to do deeper discovery. And then maybe after the webinar, you might have a product comparison grid or something like that, where you could then lead. So you're helping nurture this prospect for them within this environment that you have, utilizing this scoring methodology.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you think about the old, 20 years ago, we used to call it the thin market concept, but that's just an argument supporting the idea of this broad reach shotgun approach, where you don't really understand who you're targeting and why you're targeting them. And so that was a big problem that marketers complained about. In fact, marketers, what do they do? If they're not using Chronicle, what's the answer? They go buy data from big data aggregators. And what we learned over the last, again, almost 15 years, is that these big data aggregators, they don't have the intelligence about buyer journey. It's aggregated data. It's old, often inaccurate. And so there's a huge void in the marketplace. All the advertisers and marketers are desperate for this kind of buyer identity intelligence, but not just details on a record. They want to know that these buyers are qualified at the stage of the journey. And again, as I said before, how to kind of nurture that along. There's all kinds of tooling there, like you say, white papers, all kinds of gated content strategies, things like that they can either do themselves or they can do through us. But that is part of that. How do I activate that to create ROI? At the end of the day, that's the bottom line. And we're trying to do it in a what I think is a big paradigm shift, a different way.
Well, you're definitely solving return on ad spend, metrics problem. To me, it sounds like you're providing a wildly more efficient marketing model. And actually, even though it's more efficient, the value you're delivering is exponential. So people would be I would imagine people would be willing to pay more for it.
Yeah, we found that at the end of the day, we're very, very focused on the ROI for every dollar that our marketers spend with us. But at the same time, what's been the effect inside the business? We have seen a very dramatic increase in the average, I call it ticket. So the average amount of money that a marketer invests with MEDQOR has gone up double digits. Since launching, double digits year on year, right? So that average amount they're spending with us is going up pretty dramatically, and so we have seen that better engagement, more activity on the platform, sort of adopt this new strategy.
Do you envision for the future almost like a standalone revenue stream that can come out of Chronicle?
Yeah, I think really there's two goals that we have. We really invested in this and we've hardened the technology and we really want to expand it horizontally, whether that's new markets or just even within healthcare, expanding across these modalities and specialties. So that's maybe strategic interest priority number one, and then number two, what I think the marketers are asking for as we get into this, and again, as I said, we've had an almost 50% increase in activity on the platform as a result of this by advertisers and marketers in these groups. And so what's that tell me? It tells me that really the advertiser or marketer wants to have almost a guaranteed performance program. And I think that there's a big opportunity that a technology like Chronicle can enable, and it's moving the media companies more towards a recurring revenue model, which is what everyone's trying to figure out. Because with Chronicle, I can prove and even use the assets. I can take the risk as the media company. So, MEDQOR as the media company, the platform provider, MEDQOR can take the risk to deliver the leads because they've got the assets, and if MEDQOR can figure out how to optimize its investment in making sure that customer journey is cost effective, there's no reason why we can't guarantee performance to the advertiser and marketer and do that on a continuous basis. And so going from these episodic campaigns, which might last a year, 2 years, maybe sometimes 3 to 9 months, depending on pharmaceuticals and patents and all the stuff that we're all aware of, shifting that concept to more of a almost monthly subscription fee, but they're paying for guaranteed performance, and the media company taking some risk to deliver that performance. I think that's absolutely a key strategy and where we're interested in heading in the future with MEDQOR for sure.
Okay, terrific. Has this also, you bought MEDQOR with a sales team. You've obviously had to evolve that sales team over the years to reflect the changing nature of the business for digital. But the Chronicle offering, has that changed the conversation with customers? Like, instead of going in brand by brand, are they talking audience? Like, I can get you to this audience. I have an audience solution versus a brand solution.
Yeah, it's interesting. What we learned is that the marketplace buyers are used to buying. I kind of joke, they're buying apples, so we've got to sell them just apples that taste better. The idea of forcing some kind of big change in that particular market, in the healthcare markets, it's difficult. And so we've taken this approach, and we've learned, by the way, doing this, bleeding in the dirt, as the Marines say. But we've learned that our existing staff needs to be able to sell this capability, and it needs to be understandable and appreciated by the regular buyers that, sometimes they're massively sophisticated, but frankly, sometimes they're not, especially in the medical device space. Sometimes we have smaller companies where I've got a chief revenue officer, a chief marketing officer is crammed into the same role. And so we have to have an approach that really resonates with all of those different buying personas. And so what we found is that with Chronicle, if we were really focused on ROI and efficacy, that was the appropriate thing. So believe it or not, we built this platform so that anybody can sell it and anybody can appreciate it. But exactly to your point, what we did learn was instead of pitching them on an editorial calendar, say, which is what most of the marketplace does, what we're doing is we're leading with, hey, look at all the buyers that are on your in your market right now on our platform consuming. Here's the buyer journey they're in. We can literally show it to them live, virtually at a trade show in their office, and that is where we start the conversation. And so again, as you would expect, it really allows us to compete unfairly and be very differentiated right from the first interaction with the customer.
That's so huge, by the way. This is a major trend happening now, and that is a lot of the B2C companies have led with this, like Dotdash, Meredith, Decipher. They're all investing in selling the audience versus the brand. B2B has been behind the eight ball on this one, but I think the fire's been lit that that's really the bigger value, and you build deeper relationships with greater wallet share and stickiness to the relationship versus, as you said, versus going, well, here's our rate card, here's our editorial calendar. Yeah. You're getting to more their active buyers. You're literally telling them this is where you need to be because we have the data that that's what's happening. That's where the buyers are.
It's what the CEOs are demanding. I mean, that's the thing. It's not about charisma, steak dinners, golf. The CEOs are demanding performance. Again, the market has gone through consolidation and pressure, and man, there's just so much focus on evidence and proof of efficacy that I think you're right. It's becoming kind of table stakes. This is where we've been having fun and making a lot of headway.
So where do you see, from a visionary standpoint and knowing media and advertising and data, and with AI really coming front and center, which on one hand, I'll speak to executives and they're shaking in their boots and I'm like, not really the right response. You should look at the opportunity, but it is scary because it is dramatically changing the nature of their business. I see huge opportunity, by the way. But what do you see?
Yeah, again, I live in the world of artificial intelligence every single day. Lead another AI research firm myself every day, and it is fascinating. I think with regard to healthcare, media, and media platforms writ large, the notion of curated content, trusted content, I think is a key aspect, and then the combination of meeting the audience where they are in the journey. So if it's B2B media in particular, if I was just to focus on that kind of group of companies, I think certainly relevant communications are really important. And then helping me, provide a utility to me with a trusted brand. So I think it's the combination that, the legacy media companies have really the upper hand. They just don't realize it. They have trusted brands. And if they can just enable that trusted brand voice, sort of that, the veracity of the content. I know that brand is familiar to me. I trust it. And you can combine that with instant relevance to me and the phase of the journey that I'm in today. I mean, that's really magic. And then how to scale that out. Again, I go back to there's sort of correlation back to like an account-based marketing platform concept, that a marketer might use. But doing it as a media platform offers scale. It offers better cost effectiveness, better ROI because the media platforms have the scale. So to me, that near-term vision is really kind of twofold. It's, how can I be more relevant to that buying audience so that I can be more valuable to my customer? And then on the AI side, that's AI modeling that. Certainly we do that at Chronicle. And what we're starting to work on more, we certainly use artificial intelligence in MEDQOR to generate content. But I think because we're monitoring the marketplace and all the conditions in the market every day in real time, I think there's a really interesting opportunity to start taking all that granular data and using that to drive the content development. which again creates a bit of a virtuous circle. So again, a lot to think about, but in terms of future state, that's where we're headed.
Well, I'm just thinking of one of our members of Revenue Room, CXO, and a challenge they're having is they actually happen to be in a market that is getting pummeled by tariffs. And so literally 40% of their advertising is dried up in a month. But if I were, the reason why that happens is because the first thing to go is your traditional marketing spend, right? But if I were that customer now and had Chronicle that could tell me where I should be most efficient with my marketing, my efforts, my outreach, I would actually need you more.
Yes. I mean, this is the argument, right? This is what I saw back in 2009, between 9 and 12. The reason marketing budgets get cut with legacy companies, legacy model companies, is because the marketers cannot understand whether it's working or not. There's no evidence that it's working. And so it's easier just to cut it. But if I have a buyer and I can say, no, 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 move all those dollars to me, cut everybody else. If you give your money to me, I will guarantee you leads, live, warm, ready to buy leads, and I'll prove it to you with all the information. And we will work I'll send them into your CRM system via an API. It totally changes the environment that you're competing in. It's a David and Goliath moment. And I think that we went through that post Affordable Care Act. This is what motivated us to build the platform. I was just crazy enough to build the software, to start investing in it, and not be dazed and confused, but actually, be stimulated to try and solve the problem. But again, we went through that same kind of scenario, right, with the consolidation in the market. So anyway, I think you're right.
And actually, I would, getting my sales hat on right now, but I'd actually also venture to say it would actually keeping the investment with you would give competitive advantage to that company, because if their competitors are not doing it, they are going to have visibility into where these buyers are, and they'll have first early in and that ahead of the game nurturing. So, okay. All right. So we're at the end of our podcast, but I do always like to ask a few rapid fire questions. And the first one's going to catch you off guard because we didn't really talk about it, but I think for you it'll be easy. But I always ask, what's your favorite book? And it could be business, it could be personal, but we're creating a book club for our members, and we like to share what our podcast guests are reading.
Yeah, it's funny. I went to high school with one of Lance Armstrong's domestiques, a guy named Kevin Livingston, and he rode for the Belgian national team. There's a book called Dog in a Hat about Belgian cycling, and it's an awesome quick read. It's really fun. I have a bunch of other nerd reads that you can read too, like Alfred North Whitehead's Process of Reality, which really was foundational for me at a young age. But for a fun read, I'd say Dog in a Hat.
All right, we got that one. And then my next rapid fire is about your passion for endurance sports and how that's helped you in your entrepreneurial journey.
I got into it, racing triathlon, because my father had a brain tumor. Well, interesting story. And to help him recover or deal with the risk of him dying on the operating table, I gave him a triathlon bike and said, let's go race together. And I just learned I was good at it. And I started racing and getting a lot of positive reinforcement and winning. And what's interesting about endurance sports is, it's this compression, in work and life and with kids and everything else, everything is almost too slow. And when you're racing, you're doing an 8-hour race in an Ironman, you're forced to really focus on process, and you're forced to make decisions under duress. And I think that prepares you actually for suffering, because life is hard sometimes. It's not always easy. Build a company, I've had a lot of success, and I'm very lucky to be where I'm at. But man, there's hard, dark moments. And I think I'm going to go on a big, almost 300-mile through hike in August, and I'm not taking anybody with me. I'm carrying all my own food, all the other stuff, and it'll be a sufferfest. It's like, why do you do that? It's because I think it's helpful to be disciplined, and you learn something about yourself, about what you really can kind of put up with. And I think that's a healthy therapeutic thing. But I do think if you're making critical decisions and you're running a company with a lot of big ambition and aspiration, if you don't have that kind of resource, in the toolkit, where you know how, you know what you can do, I think you're going to have a hard time. So I found that's just as helpful as understanding how to, how to race and be disciplined. Anyway, yeah.
No, wise words. People don't realize how difficult it is to not just be a CEO, but an entrepreneur, and a solo entrepreneur is, as I say, I said I'd never do it again, and here I am doing it again.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Well, this has been absolutely fascinating. And for listeners who want to learn more about Chronicle or connect with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and I certainly try to be as active as I can there, and that's a great place to connect.
And we'll put Brian's LinkedIn URL in our show notes. That's Brian Weaver, the chairman and CEO of Torch.ai and the chairman of MEDQOR. Thank you, Brian, for sharing your insights with the Revenue Room audience.
My pleasure. Thank you.
For our listeners, if today's conversation about data-driven revenue and AI-powered value creation has resonated with you, I'd love to invite you to join us on Revenue Room Connect. This is our professional network for CEOs and their revenue-critical C-suite teams, where we talk about everything revenue, profitability, value creation related. And you can pencil in Rev'd Up dates, March 23 through 24 in St. Petersburg, Florida. Thanks for joining us today, and keep those revenue engines going.